Two Jewish schools in Montreal were hit by gunfire this morning, just 2 days after Molotov cocktails were thrown at a Jewish synagogue and community center in the city. And yesterday, a group of Jewish students at Concordia University were violently confronted by an opposing group.
Our diversity includes diversity of perspectives and opinions, but not to hate. Not to lash out with threats of violence or actual violence against someone you disagree with, no matter how strongly felt your fears or convictions are.
We must not give up to violence. We need to think about how can we stay united and to talk respectfully and to walk through respectfully through this very tough period.
The Jewish community, with close to 300 years of history in Quebec, is under attack. And anti-Semitism is not a problem that the Jews can solve.
Michael Mostyn is the CEO of B'nai B'rith, and he joins me now. Sir, as you heard there, two Jewish schools were hit by gunfire last night. Nobody was injured, thankfully, but it's still a hugely traumatic development. How is the Jewish community feeling today?
Well, anxious is a word that I think is far too light. The Jewish community, all the way across the country, not just in Montreal, not just in Quebec, but we have seen incitement all the way across this country. And the Jewish community is on edge. And it is not beyond anyone in the Jewish community, and it shouldn't be beyond anyone else that might be viewing tonight, that today marks the 85th anniversary of Kristallnacht in Nazi Germany, the day that incitement led to violent action. And that is exactly what we are seeing take place, because we have seen unhindered, unbridled incitement and Jew hatred against our Jewish community. And it is expected that we're going to see something like this. It needs to stop before it gets even more violent.
You mentioned that it's a nationwide issue, but I just want to stay in Montreal for a second because we have some new statistics from the police. In the last month alone, there's been 73 police-reported hate crimes directed at the Jewish community. There were 72 reported last year, in the entire year. How do you characterize this surge in anti-Semitic incidents?
It's an explosion in hate. It's an explosion, a targeted explosion, unfortunately, at the Jewish community. There were mentions just before talk about what's going on in Gaza right now. And people are entitled to their own opinion about what's going to be taking place in the Middle East. But I think what our various political leaders were speaking to just now was the fact that you cannot take that passion and energy and then target your neighbor. And we see radicalization in this country. We see extremist rhetoric, and it is targeted against Jews. And so what we've been seeing in Montreal these last few days, the violence on Concordia campus, we've been seeing this for a while at other university campuses, but off campus as well. This is an untenable situation. And the time is already well past for action, not just for words, because plans should have been implemented a while ago and the law should have been enforced for a while. That's how we're getting up to this level of incitement.
Let me ask you about higher education. We know York University's Federation of Students called the October 7th attack a strong act of resistance. There was, of course, that brawl at Concordia University that you mentioned. Are the country's universities safe for Jewish students?
Students, I can certainly tell you, do not feel safe. Jewish students are not safe on campus right now. I was just participating at an event at a Jewish synagogue in Toronto, where we had students and members of different organizations that assist students, and they all said with one voice all the way across the province that students, Jewish students, do not feel safe. And it's from statements just like that. Justifying resistance means justifying terrorism and justifying the murder of Jews. And they can see it in their eyes. We see the explosion on university campuses. Every student has the right to an education that's free from hate. And unfortunately, many universities are not doing their job. They're not keeping it down, demanding respect amongst students, but also saying loud and clear, we will not allow any of our student population to engage in rhetoric that we believe is is calling for violence against others. There is an absolute erosion in civility taking place right now, and that is a failure in leadership, including from our institutes of higher education, many of them.
Have you made that point to any university president or maybe some of the folks that run these colleges? Have you made that point that people just really don't feel safe right now and more needs to be done?
We have made that point, but unfortunately, many aren't acting, and many are trying to pass the buck. And I'll give a perfect example. Toronto TMU, the university formerly known as Ryerson in Toronto, had 74 students, many of whom anonymously, signed a letter which justified terror. And these are law students. And rather than dealing with this issue under their own rules and making their own education and what's wrong, is anything in order in terms of expulsions or suspensions of the students, let's make our own decision. They ended up hiring a retired judge to look into this for himself. And so in effect, trying to create a blue ribbon panel. Why cannot institutions in Canada take the authority and responsibility that is theirs and theirs alone to create a civil environment for all of its students? That is their obligation, and they should not be passing the buck.
Speaking of institutions and responsibilities, there's also an imam in Quebec, Adel Sharkawi. He denounced what he calls Zionist aggressors, and he called on Allah to kill the enemies of the people of Gaza and to spare none of them. Should this man be arrested and charged with the crime?
This is an example of this incitement that we were discussing. And I don't know what's worse, this individual making this statement publicly or the crowd listening in rapt intent, and not just one person. We're talking about a mob who were listening and approving of this messaging. Absolutely, this individual has to be charged. Absolutely, we have to begin enforcing the rule of law and hate laws. And I'll tell you something else. The Jewish community feels it's well past time to make excuses. Let's not make excuses that our police officers need more training, that they don't have the training. They have the training. We need the political leadership to allow for police and crown attorneys to enforce the rule of law in this country. That starts all the way at the top. It starts with our Prime Minister. It starts with our Minister of Justice, Arif Virani, issuing directives, getting in touch with his provincial and territorial counterparts so that our police understand what is this, what is the plan, how are we going to tamper down this incitement? Because what ends up happening if we don't deal with this incitement, and then we're going to get a violent situation take place, we will see an overreaction that will trounce upon the civil liberties that we're also concerned about protecting quite rightly right now. We need a plan, but that plan begins with having meetings. Have those meetings been had? We're not aware of any such meetings that have been taking place between the territorial and provincial leaders and the federal government and the Justice Ministry. That has to have had taken place yesterday. The Crown and the police should be directed in general terms on how to deal with this incitement, how to deal with this hateful speech, calls to genocide, iconography of terrorist organizations which keep popping up at rallies all the way across the countries, which is causing incitement to Jews. And we are seeing the results of this right now. We cannot wait. We can't wait for someone to be killed.
The federal government is chipping in $5 million to help with security at religious and cultural sites. Is that enough?
I don't believe so, not from what we've heard. We've heard security costs are through the roof all the way across the countries, because it's not just synagogues, it's schools, children can't even... Parents don't feel safe with their kids outside at recess right now, with the situation right now. So is $5 million enough? It's a lot of money. It's going to get burnt through rather quickly unless we tamp down the incitement. Let's go to the root.
Right.
The root is not the security. The root is enforcing the rule of law. Those who are inciting others and sometimes using crafty language, those are the people that have to be dealt with properly through our judicial system, and then we won't need those security dollars if we are enforcing the rule of law. And those who are offending the hate crimes, the hate speech laws in this country, they'll know that they can't get away with it, and others will learn that lesson as well.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much to Michael Mostyn, CEO of B'nai B'rith. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks so much, JP.